Todd Chrisley reveals why he rejected prison chores and won. Hello, everyone. Welcome back for another video. I hope everyone's having a great day. Before watching the video, please subscribe and like it. Since their presidential pardon, Todd and Julie Chrisley have been quite open about their time in prison. In a recent share, Todd recently opened up about prison chores. As he revealed, he and Julie had quite different experiences while behind bars. A star from Bravo's Real Housewives franchise was also there for the conversation. Todd and Julie had a special guest during a recent podcast episode. Todd, Julie, and the Chrisley family became known to audiences through the USA Network series, Chrisley Knows Best. In 2022, Todd and Julie were convicted of a variety of charges, including bank fraud and tax evasion. Todd was initially sentenced to 12 years in Pensacola's federal prison camp. Julie was sentenced to 7 years in Lexington's Federal Medical Center. However, the two would see an early release in 2025 thanks to a presidential pardon from President Donald Trump. Since then, Todd and Julie have opened up about their time in prison with various outlets, including their own podcast series. However, the two often share that they had different experiences behind bars. This recently became a topic of discussion with friend and guest Kandi Burruss of the Real Housewives of Atlanta fame. At one point, Burruss admitted, "I just can't see you in jail," while speaking to Todd. He shared, "I ran my block." Julie then shared, "I had a hard time. I adhered to the rules. Keep in mind, I was in a place where there was no air conditioning." For his part, Todd made it clear that he went there to do time, not chores. Julie noted, "I did work, he didn't." When asked why, Todd simply shared, "I refused." Julie admitted that working in prison came with some advantages, however. Working did come with some perks for Julie. As she shared, she could get some homey comforts while working in the commissary. She noted, "I wanted to make sure I could order my shampoo and body wash and makeup. I mean, it was an MAC, but we could get the CoverGirl, the Maybelline, the Wet n Wild. You would walk down the hall, and somebody would have fake lashes, fake hair. There was more weave in there." In a previous podcast episode, Todd also shared that he enjoyed all sorts of food while in prison. He previously shared, "I had Chick-fil-A, I had Burger King, I had pizza, I had Culver's," which, let me just go ahead and tell you, this is not an ad, but Culver's is my jam now. "I had Olive Garden once, but I didn't like it." Of course, that's not to say Todd didn't have any job while behind bars. As previously reported, Todd was said to have worked as an assistant to a prison chaplain. However, he was removed from the position back in October, prior to his presidential pardon. At the time, attorney Jay Sargent shared that Todd was upset over losing the position, with claims that he lost the job without proper cause. Todd Chrisley, once known for his polished image, sharp humor, and control over every detail of his family's hit reality series, is now gaining attention for an entirely different battle. One that is taking place not on television screens, but behind the walls of prison. The Chrisley Knows Best patriarch has revealed why he chose to reject mandatory prison chores and how his fight led to a surprising victory. His defiance has sparked both controversy and admiration, with some praising his courage to challenge a system many see as unfair, while others accuse him of seeking special treatment. His story adds a new twist to the ongoing saga of his incarceration. For Todd, life in prison has been a world away from the luxury lifestyle he once flaunted on television. Instead of designer clothes, private jets, and sprawling mansions, he was confronted with strict schedules, rigid rules, and an expectation that all inmates would perform menial labor, from kitchen duty to laundry work. Chores in prison are often presented as part of daily life, providing structure and accountability, yet Todd made a bold decision. He refused to participate, arguing that the system was exploiting inmates by forcing them to work under harsh conditions for little to no pay. According to those close to him, Todd believes prison labor is not only degrading but also in violation of basic human rights. He has described how inmates are often compelled to perform physically demanding tasks while receiving compensation that amounts to mere cents per hour. A system he says resembles modern-day slavery. His stance is that incarceration itself is the punishment and that forcing people to work without fair wages crosses a line from rehabilitation to exploitation. His refusal was not an act of laziness, but a deliberate challenge to what he calls a broken system. Inmates who refuse chores typically face consequences ranging from loss of privileges to solitary confinement, yet Todd stood firm. His background as a television personality and his natural confidence reportedly made him unafraid to challenge the rules. In his words, "Prison labor is designed to keep people broken rather than to build them back up." Sources reveal that he lodged formal complaints through his attorneys and relied on both legal arguments and public pressure to resist disciplinary measures. The move was risky but ultimately successful, as he was reportedly granted an exemption from many of the standard work assignments. Todd's victory has fueled debate about whether celebrity status played a role. Some critics argue that the average inmate who refused chores would never win such a battle. They suggest that Todd's platform fame and ability to draw media attention gave him leverage unavailable to others. However, supporters counter that his win sets a precedent and brings awareness to a controversial issue. Prison labor has long been criticized by human rights organizations, who argue that the system profits off incarcerated individuals while offering them no protections or fair compensation. Todd's decision to push back aligns him with activists calling for reform. His daughter Savannah Chrisley has been one of his loudest advocates. She has spoken on her podcast and in interviews about her father's refusal to bow down to the system, framing it as an act of principle rather than privilege. Savannah has highlighted how her father's choice reflects his personality. He is not someone who tolerates being controlled or silenced, and prison has not changed that. She describes his rejection of chores as a refusal to let the system strip away his dignity and as proof that he remains determined to stand up for himself and others. For Todd, this victory goes beyond personal comfort. It has become part of his broader stance against the injustices of incarceration. He has been vocal about mistreatment in prison, including lack of medical care, unsafe living conditions, and now unfair labor practices. His refusal to accept chores was not simply about avoiding work, but about challenging a system that he views as exploitative and abusive. His family has indicated that he wants to use his time behind bars to bring awareness to issues often overlooked until someone with a platform dares to speak up. Observers note that prison labor is a deeply embedded part of the American justice system. Inmates perform tasks ranging from cooking and cleaning within the facility to working for outside companies that contract prison labor, often at pennies on the dollar. Supporters of the system argue that it provides structure, discipline, and opportunities for rehabilitation. However, critics like Todd argue that the lack of choice and fair compensation makes it a form of exploitation with little genuine benefit. His refusal to accept such work calls into question whether prisons should continue relying on forced labor at all. Todd's determination to fight back has also raised questions about the risks he faced. Most inmates who refuse work detail face harsh punishments, and few succeed in overturning the requirement. But Todd's case demonstrates how persistence, legal pressure, and public scrutiny can shift the balance. Those who know him say he was unwavering. Even when prison officials warned him about potential consequences, he relied on his sharp instincts and determination to push back against what he saw as unjust. He did not waver in the face of intimidation, and that resilience eventually paid off. The public response has been mixed. While many commend his courage and see him as taking a principled stand, others accuse him of simply wanting to avoid responsibility and hard work. Critics argue that prison is designed to teach discipline and accountability, and that refusing chores undermines the purpose of the system. Yet Todd and his supporters counter that accountability can exist without exploitation, and that the punishment of imprisonment is sufficient without adding forced labor into the equation. His story forces society to question whether the goal of prison is rehabilitation or control. Legal experts have weighed in on his case, suggesting that Todd may have opened the door for future legal challenges to prison labor policies. Some argue that the 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery but allowed involuntary servitude as punishment for crime, has been misused to justify exploitation of prisoners. Todd's case draws attention to this loophole and could inspire broader conversations about whether the system needs to be reevaluated in modern times. His win may be seen as a small but significant step toward change, even if it was fueled in part by his celebrity status. Savannah has said that her father's resilience continues to inspire her. She describes how he maintains his faith and his sense of humor, even in the darkest moments. She insists that his refusal to accept chores is just one example of his determination not to let the prison system define him or break his spirit. The Chrisley family remains united in their fight to clear their name and expose what they see as corruption and abuse. Their bond has only deepened through adversity, and Todd's small victories behind bars serve as motivation for the family to keep pushing. In a society increasingly questioning its approach to incarceration, Todd's story has found fertile ground. Activists for prison reform point to him as an example of how even high-profile individuals can be subjected to unfair practices and how resistance is possible. His case illustrates both the flaws of the system and the potential for change when someone refuses to accept the status quo while many prisoners remain voiceless. Todd has chosen to raise his voice loudly and unapologetically. The implications of Todd's stand reach beyond his personal circumstances. By winning his fight against chores, he has exposed the reality of forced labor within prisons to a broader audience. Many Americans are unaware of just how much prison labor contributes to state budgets and private industry. Todd's refusal forces a closer look at whether the practice aligns with a society that values freedom, dignity, and fairness. His story compels the public to reconsider assumptions about what prison should be and what rights should remain intact even behind bars. For Todd Chrisley, rejecting prison chores was not simply a matter of defiance. It was an act of resistance grounded in principle. His victory may not dismantle the prison labor system overnight, but it has cracked open a conversation that can no longer be ignored. His journey continues to reveal the contradictions of a system that claims to rehabilitate while relying on practices that many see as oppressive. For the man who once prided himself on controlling every detail of his life, his refusal to be controlled even in prison has become his most defining act yet. Todd's revelation about why he rejected chores and how he won underscores his transformation from reality star to unlikely advocate. He has moved the conversation beyond his celebrity scandal to broader issues of justice, fairness, and human rights. In doing so, he has ensured that his story is not just one of downfall, but also of defiance and determination. What did you think about Todd Chrisley's recent admission? Have you been following the Chrisley Confessions 2.0 podcast? Make sure you come back to TV Shows Ace for all the latest TV and celebrity news. Thanks for watching this video. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, America Trends 24, and stay with us.